emergency for the first time in about
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1076.PS7208, certificate number 27531. The River of Doubt.
Let me see. You're not anyone I know now. Perhaps later, on my hunting trip to Africa. Yes, you look like someone I might meet in the jungle.
You've been to Mount Rushmore?
I have. It's a little underwhelming. It's kind of the Plymouth Rock of the West.
What, of the four presidents there, who's the outlier?
Well, Lincoln's the only one with a beard.
Okay.
I believe Washington's the only
one.
Washington's the only one that has a collar. The sculptor got lazy after that one.
The only one with slave teeth.
With visible, yes, the only one with slave teeth, unless Jefferson has something kinky going on. That
it's
we
not
don't
on
know
the
about.
record. Not on the record.
I feel like the obvious answer is Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah. Why?
Glasses. No.
Oh, glasses, right, of course.
Because the other three were all, decades and decades in the past by the time, a century or thereabouts in the past by the time Mount Rushmore was sculpted. Whereas Roosevelt's a more recent president, and probably, I don't know this for sure, but maybe just there on the strength of his emphasis on conservation and public parks in the West. It seems like he's right for Mount Rushmore, even if that makes it a little less of a pantheon of everybody's four go-to presidents. It's not James Madison, despite writing the Constitution, for example.
Right. It's hard to judge, like, as we've talked, I think, many times on the show, hard to judge in recent history who the legends are going to be. I think when Obama was first elected, we all imagined that he was a world historical figure, and then
he won the Nobel Peace Prize for basically just redecorating the Oval Office.
Yeah, right. And now only 4 years later, I mean, he's clearly a beloved figure, but probably not going to be enshrined in the pantheon of the greatest people to hold the office.
And now we assume Mount Rushmore is a pantheon.
Yeah.
But that's maybe not necessarily true. I don't know if that's ever in the press release that, guess what? We just sculpted the four best presidents and made them really big.
I'm not sure whether the plan was to keep adding presidents to Mount Rushmore.
Like Disney World?
Like it was 14, 15 phases. But yeah, I think part of the problem is if you include Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson,
any fourth president's going to be Ringo.
Yeah, you're going to fall prey to the "is this a pantheon?" question. You can't then just put up your favorite president. But Roosevelt, in his time, was considered one of the great presidents, and I think the assumption was that he would go down in history as one of the great American presidents. Still, I think on the list, the list of top 5 to 10.
But I feel like the conservation thing has to help. Like the Dakotas has a Theodore Roosevelt National Park, right?
I think that's a big part of it. But he was also Roosevelt went on a lot of expeditions in his life and was kind of not just somebody that conserved the American far west, but a paragon of a kind of American manly outdoorsy virtue.
he's a larger than life figure in a way that it's hard to point to another president not on Mount Rushmore. I guess maybe Grant.
Yeah, right. But Grant's alcoholism kind of puts him in a asterisk column.
But Teddy Roosevelt has, he's got a military background.
Right.
Busted trusts.
But also Harvard, and then he was a Bronco buster, and he's
a real person in a way that you wouldn't say about even popular presidents, William McKinley or Calvin Coolidge.
A rounded person, but also maybe by contemporary standards, he would be accused of being a dilettante, and I think was accused of it in his own time. Oh,
is that right?
Yeah.
Even at the time, people were like, "Hey, you can't do all this stuff."
I mean, as a rich kid, it's one thing to go work on a cattle ranch in the American West. It's another thing to go work on a cattle ranch as a rich kid. You're always going to be trying to prove that you're there as a real hard worker or as a scientist,
not just a dude.
And I think there's a little bit of that maybe plagued him and motivated him to excel at the things he tried, just to always kind of dispel the suggestion that he's coasting.
That's nice that that's not just a modern invention, the suspicion of the trust fund kid.
Yeah,
we've always had it.
But this was also an era where, I mean, in the age of exploration, who can afford to go chart uncharted rivers in Central America or South
just like
America?
Today. Who else can afford to take unpaid internships at Vanity Fair?
Sure. Who can afford to go around the world in a dirigible that has your name on the side?
That's why you can't tax the rich.
That's exactly right.
You wind up with a dirigible poor civilization.
But Roosevelt was I think he exemplified a kind of frontier spirit that's not really in fashion right now, in the sense that we're not lionizing scions of wealthy families who go to foreign countries and kill a bunch of wildebeest and name rivers after themselves.
Is it really lionizing if they shoot wildebeests?
It's wildebeestizing?
I mean, I'm sure he shot lions,
I bet he did, yeah. I mean, and he represents an earlier version of conservationism.
If you shoot a wildebeest with a gun, is that new metal?
If you shoot a wildebeest with a gun.
It's GNU metal.
But, he came back from a lot of these expeditions with 50 to 500 taxidermied animals to display in the Museum of Natural History. It's not what we would consider conservationism exactly.
But it was conservationism back then.
It really was.
Yeah.
And I think what we consider conservationism now is a product of a generation of people that went to the Museum of Natural History and saw those news.
I still can't take my daughter to any natural history that's more than 40 years old because it will be 80% taxidermy dioramas.
Right.
And she doesn't want to see that.
Right. My sister either doesn't want to see a stuffed bald eagle. But that was before widespread nature photography. I mean, that was how you were going to see a zebra unless you went to a zoo, which are also somewhat questionable.
Right.
But Roosevelt was larger than life, as we have established, and I mean, he's still the president from around the turn of the century that we remember best. We have Lincoln and Grant, and then there's a period where we have several presidents that only a Jeopardy contestant would be able to put in order.
Right. He really is the exception between Grant and FDR.
Well, I mean, we've got
Wilson, Grant Wilson, I guess.
Right. And he does. He's the he stands between them kind of. We know like Taft because Taft is hilarious, and also Taft was Roosevelt's, apprentice in a way.
Don't fat shame Taft.
No. He's
you think he's funny at parties?
I just mean he's wonderful. Taft is.
He was an athlete, even though he's a big guy. He surfed at Waikiki.
Taft had Taft's mustache made him very aerodynamic. That's something that a lot of people don't know.
A lot of surfers today don't have that kind of mustache, but they should.
They should. They don't realize that that's part of the game.
You can wax your mustache and your board at the same time.
Wax your mustache. That's not a euphemism.
That's not.
But Roosevelt ascended to the presidency not initially by being elected, but because he was the vice president and his president died. Can you name the president?
That president was
In the form of a question.
who is William McKinley.
Yes.
What do I win?
Da, 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 da.
Now, are you saying Teddy Roosevelt shot William McKinley
Teddy Roosevelt.
at the Buffalo Expo?
Someone tried to shoot Teddy. They succeeded later, but someone tried to shoot Teddy and he stepped out of the way and the bullet hit McKinley. No, that's not what happened.
He did a Matrix bullet time thing.
But McKinley was assassinated. Teddy became the president at the time and still the youngest president ever.
Yeah, not Kennedy.
That's right. He was 42 when he took the office.
Kennedy's
of
the
presidency.
youngest elected, which is a little different.
Teddy served out McKinley's term. McKinley was assassinated early on in the term and then was elected a second time. So he was president from 1901 to 1909. And then after he was, then he sort of handed off the presidency to Taft, his pal, but then got frustrated with Taft and decided to run again for president. And even though he'd served as president for 8 years, because he'd only been elected once, he still was eligible. I mean,
there were no limits.
There were no limits.
It was kind of an informal. Only Washington gets two terms. Gets 2 terms. Yeah.
Well, Washington established 2 terms, and so no one should have a third.
You can't beat Washington, but
Right.
he had the asterisk of, well, I only had 1.8 terms.
And it was his cousin FDR that eventually that broke the rule. So it's the Roosevelts that really are trying to exceed the 2-term limit.
Rich New York kids.
That's exactly
The
it.
1912 election is interesting because it's Taft, Wilson, and Teddy Roosevelt. It's 3 past president and future presidents running against each other.
Right. And Roosevelt and Taft, split the vote.
Roosevelt's running as a third party, but yeah, he's cannibalizing Republican votes from Taft.
And so Wilson ends up winning, and the experience was demoralizing to Roosevelt, who kind of hadn't experienced a ton of loss up until that point.
Is that right? That was a real moment of reckoning. When you run as a third party candidate,
he started his own party, the Bull Moose Party, and
I don't know if he liked the name. Like, to him, it was the Progressive Party, but the people had spoken and they decided they were going to nickname it the Bull Moose Party because he told reporters that he was fit and ready to run again because he was fit as a bull moose. So
fit as a bull moose, and that became his that they hung that around his neck.
That's kind of rough.
Yeah,
he didn't keep saying it. It wasn't part of his stump speech.
And the Progressive Party, I mean, that's fascinating nomenclature. Given our current use of the word.
I mean, and during that age when progressivism was a sign of vitality and the future, it wasn't, today we would imagine that as being a super strong social justice party, and it was not. It was a little lily-livered on civil rights issues. But
yeah, Roosevelt was lionized in his time and wildebeested even. But he won the Nobel Peace Prize for kind of brokering a peace between the Russians and the Japanese. But having lost the election in 1912, he kind of fell into a somewhat despondent state. And Roosevelt had gone on adventures before, and most up until that point, most notably after he handed the presidency, I guess, over to Taft, he went on.
And just to be clear, there was an election.
There was an election, right? But I mean, after he groomed Taft,
his successor, yeah.
He went on what I think now contemporary critics would look at this adventure as a
Vacation?
vacation and a super. It's the kind of vacation that when the Trump sons do it now, they're just vilified on social media. It was a
safaris and whatnot.
a safari, but it was a safari sponsored by the Smithsonian. So representing this era where you weren't just shooting elephants for fun, you were shooting elephants to bring back, shooting elephants to understand them better.
It was kind of rare for an ex-president to do anything back then. I mean,
now.
Well, Jimmy Carter's probably building a house right now while you and I are just farting around with a podcast. So,
but Roosevelt on his 1909 expedition to Africa killed or trapped 11,400 animals.
How long was the trip?
What's interesting about the trip is that at this point in time, the presidency ended in March.
Oh, right.
His presidency ended on March 4th, and by March 23rd...
He had marched forth.
He marched forth on March 23rd.
It's confusing.
And began this enormous safari that lasted over a year, like 3 weeks later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like 3 weeks later, I think...
I would still be
Obama was still unpacking.
Yeah, I would still be unpacking.
If it's about a year and he killed 11,400 animals, that's over 30 a day.
Yeah, and a lot of the animals...
It's a busy... Is it like some Great White Hunter thing where he's got a bunch of staff collecting butterflies for him and padding his totals?
So there are a lot of birds and reptiles and fish. I mean,
but is he getting credit for stuff he didn't trap? That's what I want to say.
Yeah, the whole expedition, which was which numbered dozens of people. They're picking snails up off the ground and putting them in plastic or putting them in kill jars. And those snails count against the total. It's not 11,400 lions they killed. But still.
That's how new species get found.
And
I like that he's getting snails and crawfish or whatever. That shows that he's just not interested in the glamour of shooting things.
Yeah, it was a fantastically successful expedition in the terms of its time.
Oh, he killed 11 black rhinos.
11 black rhinos.
Aren't black rhinos now extinct?
Yeah, or
boy, I wish we could
have
it. I wish we could have some of those back.
But he's basically there for the founding of the Museum of Natural History, and basically like all zoological exhibitions in museums are extend from this kind of like let's go to Africa.
Let's get a collection
and get a collection going, and it's purely in the colonialist model of assuming that Africa is an undiscovered place and an unmapped place, and marching in pith helmets spinning to explore and catalog and map and define the continent in European terms.
I'm white. I get to keep whatever I found.
Yeah, Euro-American terms, in other words. But there's plenty of precedent in Roosevelt's life for this kind of adventure, and in fact, he brought his son Kermit with him on this African adventure. Kermit was a freshman at Harvard and got permission to go take a leave of absence for a year.
Do we think Kermit was a common name back then?
I don't think Kermit was a common name. The Roosevelts, although the most famous Roosevelts are named Ted and Frank, they also have plenty of sort of waspy weird names. Is
Kermit kind of an upper class name at the time, do you think?
I can't think of another Kermit, except Kermit has a son named Kermit Jr. that we'll probably talk about on a future Omnibus.
Yeah, we are. This is a Kermit Roosevelt series.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about all the Kermits. Roosevelt's great grandson is named Tweed.
Really?
I wish I had more. I wish I was more adventurous in. I guess if I had 9 kids, maybe I would name them things like Tweed and Mick George and Frankfurter or whatever. Give them some interesting names.
You think smaller family size is leading to
Macbeth?
It's bad luck. You think smaller family sizes leading to less name exploration?
Yeah, there are so many Elizabeths now because everybody has one kid and they name their daughter something that isn't going to. I mean, you don't have one kid and name them McGeorge.
Kermit peaked in popularity in 1909 when it was the 175th most popular boy's name in America.
What's it derived from? What's its history? Kermit.
The most recent, the last time Kermit was in the top 1,000 was 1978, where it represented 0.004% of total male births.
People were naming their kids after the frog in 1978.
Right. When was Kermit Roosevelt Sr. born?
Kermit was born in 1889.
Oh, okay.
So
1907 could be an echo effect of having a well-known presidential kid, the way I'm sure there are more Chelseas in 1998 than there were in 1988.
I think that's probably 100% true. Kermit was a kid that grew up partly in the White House, and grew up in the White House. He was a kid throughout Roosevelt's 2 terms in office.
Oh, by the way, it's a version of the Manx surname Kermode.
Oh.
But I've never known anyone named Kermode, so that's just kicking the can a little more. Oh, I guess if there's I guess it's related to McDermott. I don't know why if your name was Kermit McDermott. Yeah, it was fun to be a Roosevelt kid in the White House. I've read stories about Teddy making sure he took off an hour every day and just having children's hour where he'd just play with the kids and they'd slide down the White House stairs on cookie sheets.
Yeah, you can imagine they'd just walk through the house with blunderbusses, just shooting at the chandeliers.
Every member of the family had his or her own pair of stilts, which I'm sure which I'm sure is the last White House family where everybody had stilts.
I bet it was fun to be Kermit, although like a lot of children of famous people, I think he was overshadowed by his father. A lot of his biggest adventures happened at his father's elbow.
Yeah, I kind of wonder what that's like. Like, you're probably aware that you're getting way more pluses out of it than minuses, so you feel like it would be churlish to complain about being born into fame and privilege.
Yeah.
But you still probably think, why do I always have to be the footnote?
Yeah, I mean, you wonder, I think we're seeing with the Trump kids right now that they're really trying to assert themselves within their father's orbit as individuals and are being strangely successful. You know, I think Don Jr. is becoming a conservative,
pundit.
Yeah, star, right? I mean, if Don Sr. died tomorrow,
God forbid,
Don Jr. would still have a career, which it was not clear he was going to have before his father became president. And Ivanka, I'm sure, is going to land on her feet. And Eric, I think, has to end up balancing the books.
Eric might actually get his GED. We don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But that's not true of a lot of children of famous people. And
well, I mean, these guys have the ultimate platform. It's not like the Trump kids did it through pure aptitude and ingenuity.
No, quite well, not ingenuity, but I guess different kinds of aptitude, right? If you're going to be a demagogue, and you could have an aptitude.
I mean, in a post-Trump era, I think it'll be interesting to see if any of that kind of magical halo that a certain part of populist America has conferred on the Trumps will actually survive the end of their movement, and if the kids will become the new repositories for it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing for Don Jr. to be like a sort of a pit bull on behalf of his father, but would he? Yeah. Does that translate to power of his own?
What's his own? Yeah. And it's really never happened before. Like, even in the case of, there are plenty of U.S. political dynasties, but even in the case of a John Quincy Adams or a George W. Bush, they got name recognition from their parents, but it's not like there was some kind of halo of marketability that they inherited from all the George H.W. Bush fans who were like, hey, who's got more of that?
Right.
He had to go through the wilderness first.
Ken, I know you're a clean man.
Yes, I'm a clean old man.
Yes, very clean.
Head to toe.
Yeah, you read as someone with a lot of hygiene.
Yes, I'm extremely sanitary, and I'm a long time early bidet adopter.
Is that right?
Yes.
From what age did you start using a bidet?
I think we first got. I mean, I first time in Europe, you
Right.
fiddle around with it, you experiment a little. Those college years of
Fiddling about.
And then I think we've had one in our bathroom for about 10 years.
Well, I used to think of it as a luxury item, but
And it was.
Mhm.
They were very expensive for a long time.
But now they've become affordable, something that an omnibus futurely could have in their own home.
The Hello Tushy 3.0 is stylish, eco-friendly, easy to install, and extremely affordable for this space. If you've ever priced these, you will be surprised at what a deal the Hello Tushy is.
It attaches to your existing toilet. It requires no electricity or additional plumbing, and it cuts toilet paper use by 80%.
You can't afford not to stop wiping, in my opinion.
So go to hellotushy.com/omnibus to get 10% off this already affordable Hello Tushy 3.0, plus free shipping.
If you're bidet skeptical, keep in mind your new Hello Tushy 3.0 will come with a 60-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty.
Also, the Hello Tushy is amazingly not only will it clean your bottom, but it's self-cleaning as well.
It cleans two things.
This is a special offer for our listeners only. That's hellotushy.com/omnibus for 10% off.
Go to hellotushy.com/omnibus, 10% off plus free shipping.
So Kermit was raised in this environment of sliding down the stairs on a cookie sheet and was expected somewhat to follow in his father's footsteps. He went on the big safari to Africa. He went to Harvard. But he seemed like a more retiring figure, like a shyer,
like Kermit the Frog.
like Kermit the Frog, Sesame Street News. He wanted to, live his own life, and he didn't necessarily want to live like a broadly public life, but he kept kind of getting absorbed back into his father's orbit, and so their next adventure. After Roosevelt lost the 1912 election, he was despondent. He was now in his 50s and was sort of casting about, wasn't sure what to do next, and was offered an invitation to go to South America on a speaking tour. He was known worldwide as an interesting raconteur and adventurer. He'd survived an assassination attempt during the 1912 election cycle, and
narrowly, right?
Yeah, and famously kept the bullet in his chest. That's the story where he was shot and finished his speech. But they never took the bullet out; it was still there. So he was a macho character, and of course you can imagine him going to Rotary clubs throughout Argentina and being really celebrated.
It's funny, we expect that from presidents today, but I guess it was an option in 1913 as well.
Sure, got to pay the bills, but also have to keep busy. And once he was scheduled to do this speaking tour of South America, he said, what would be cool is if we did like a kind of safari, a version of the safari we did in Africa. We'll get a bunch of guys together.
Good times, right? Remember?
Yeah, we'll go up the Amazon. We'll collect a bunch of reptiles.
I've been that kind of dad trying to recreate the fun family outing or vacation the second time. It's kind of hard.
It's a little hard, right? And it's especially hard. It's one thing to start an adventure in Africa in 1908, having just successfully been the president for 2 terms. It's another thing to go on an adventure in 1913 when you just lost an election. It's just got a little bit of a shadow over it already.
What's the expedition? Does he do the speaking gigs?
So he goes on the speaking gigs, and his plan is to do a kind of an outing where you could keep your white linen suit on the whole time.
I assume that was most of his adventuring.
Yeah, like butterfly collecting. Like you ride an elephant, and there are porters who make sure that your camp chairs are set up before you dismount.
It just occurred to me before you get to the expedition itself. It occurs to me that the appeal of lecture tours would have been even greater back then, when there was no radio or TV opportunity to see a celebrity in action, to hear and see a famous name. Like really your only chance to...
this is before newsreels even.
Right. Your only chance to hear or see Teddy Roosevelt would be to wait for him to come to your town and pack into the Odeon or whatever.
Right, the exhibition hall where he rolls out a stuffed tiger and tells the story of being shot.
So that's why a Charles Dickens or a Twain or whatever spends their twilight years doing that, because that's the only platform besides publishing.
And that's right. Roosevelt famously published books about his adventures, and so he would go on speaking tours that were basically book tours.
Imagine getting in the book line for Teddy Roosevelt. Hey, how's it going? Who can I make this out to?
But once he's in South America, as he's planning this adventure, he's kind of he's introduced to one of the most famous Brazilian explorers of his era, he's recommended to Roosevelt as his guide for this adventure.
Yeah, why don't you tell me instead of asking me who the most famous Brazilian explorers of the 1910s are?
Go ahead, run down some options.
You tell me who this is, and I'll tell you if he's in my top 10 or not.
Okay, it's a man named Candido Rondon.
Oh yeah.
Do you know Candido? Candido?
I just realized I know his last name.
Candido?
From the expedition he ended up co-leading with TR.
Candido Rondon.
That's so Rondon.
Candido. And there's a little accent aigu over the A in Candido. What does that say about its pronunciation? It's Portuguese.
If Portuguese is the same as Spanish, that just means you put the accent on the first
Candido.
syllable. It would not be Candido. It's Candido. You're saying it right.
Candido Rondon. And Senor Rondon is a larger-than-life legendary figure in Brazil. He's the son of his father was Portuguese and Spanish, but also had a lot of indigenous forebears, and his mother also was largely an indigenous, like Brazilian native.
So he's like an Amazon explorer.
He's an Amazon explorer, but he went through sort of a traditional route. He joined the military. He was a surveyor and did a lot of the exploration of the Brazilian interior in the sort of turn of the 19th, 20th century era. He was a pioneer of the telegraph. So he was the first person to connect Brazil to Peru and Bolivia via telegraph. And that involved exploring...
Yeah, those are tough routes.
Completely uncharted territory. And this was an era when there were still a lot of uncontacted tribes, and a lot of uncontacted tribes that were extremely hostile to outsiders. Rondon contacted tribes where every other person that had ever come in contact with them had been killed by poison arrows. And Rondon was the first European, or the first representative of the colonial power to make contact with these tribes. And
he would take a poison dart in the chest and still finish his speech.
In fact, we'll see in a second that was kind of one of his mottos. I'll take a poison dart for you. But this was a time when Central South America was one of the last completely uncharted places.
Yeah, it's interesting that a Brazilian explorer is doing domestic exploration of his own interior, know, the way that would have happened in the U.S. 100 years earlier.
If you look at a map of South America and kind of make a big circle right in the very heart of it, which would be in southwestern Brazil, you make a big heart shape there. That was a territory that was a lot of it is Amazon River tributaries and completely unexplored, like thick jungle. It's flat country on the other side of the mountains, but like very, very, really far away, I guess, far away from the coasts and hard to access. Anyway, so Rondon was famous in Brazil. This was an area called the Mato Grosso, which was literally
That's
like
Portuguese for
thick bush.
Gross mat.
Yeah, basically
same thing.
thick bush. And it was populated by uncontacted tribes and crazy wild animals and a network of uncharted rivers that all presumably flow to the Amazon. But
isn't it ironic that back then the place that was called thick bush was Brazilian? Today, those are opposites. It's when you think about it.
Boy, that one comment deserves its own omnibus entry. He ended up surveying all of Brazil's borders with foreign countries, and so he's this like great adventurer, and proposed to Roosevelt as the guide for Roosevelt's riverboat expedition to collect butterflies.
Because a VIP will get you funding.
That's right. This is an era where there are a lot of European explorers competing to contact these tribes, to discover the lost cities of the Amazon. There's the famous pursuit of the lost city of Z, which was the kind of like maybe fatal fascination of a man named Percy Fawcett.
Right. The idea that there are these giant Mesoamerican cities in the lost in the rain, choked by rainforest now.
Yeah, and you can go and the first person to discover it, would be made a famous archaeologist. And sadly, Percy Fawcett pursued the lost city of Z until he got lost himself and died in the jungle in 1925, only to have a plausible lost city discovered shortly after his death by others, the city of Kuhikugu. That's right.
But he did get his own.
Kuhikugu.
But he did get his own Netflix movie or Amazon movie, so it's okay.
Well, it's small consolation.
Given the setting, probably Amazon.
All kinds of things plausibly existed up there in the jungle, upriver, and so Roosevelt, in talking to Rondon, you can imagine the conversation where Rondon says, "Sure, I'll guide you on a butterfly exhibition, or I'll guide you on a safari, but I've got some.
Here's the real mystery.
Yeah, I've got some exploring to do. I've discovered the headwaters of an uncharted river in my telegraph line laying mission of last year."
And do we think Teddy and Kermit's eyes light up at this, or are they more into their white linen expedition?
So Kermit's not involved at this point, but Teddy very definitely eyes light up, because this is an opportunity to go on an adventure that has a scientific basis, and that would be this is a very like Livingston, I presume, style charting uncharted land, or uncharted by Europeans.
Not something he's really done before, despite all his travels.
And increasingly hard to do even then.
So funny to imagine an ex-president doing this
at the age of 50, or early 50s, to say like
we're impressed when George W. Bush takes up acrylic painting. You know?
Right.
This would be more like I'm going to go into space, or I'm going to a Mars base or something.
Right. It's precisely that. Like, I'm going to go in a bathysphere to the bottom of the ocean and live there for a year.
Yeah.
So Roosevelt decides, yes, I don't want to do this soft mission that I went on. This is my last chance to be a boy, and I want to join you on your expedition to discover the route of a river that Rondon had christened the River of Doubt.
What is the doubt?
The doubt is
That it exists,
that
or-
nothing is known about it. He found the headwaters, and he knows that it connects to a tributary of the Amazon called the Aripuanã River. Now, wait a minute. The little the Aripuanã, the thing that should be over the N is over the A.
The tilde?
Yeah, the tilde. What does that mean? So it's not Aripuanã. It's Aripuanã. It's like a Portuguese pronunciation.
Those are nasal in Portuguese. When in Spanish, all that ever does is go over an N.
Right.
But in Portuguese, it makes a vowel nasal. Do I know how to say it? No.
Aripuanã.
That was guttural.
Aripuanã.
Yeah. Go through your nose.
Aripuanã.
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 I'm sure that's super close.
So the river was known where the river connected to the larger Amazonian
So they could get there.
tributary.
They just didn't know where it went.
And Rondon found the headwaters, which were far, far out in southwestern Brazil, and the river flowed north.
Okay, so he has both ends of the river, basically?
Yeah,
Okay.
but no idea where it went or what it did. And this is the big adventure, right, of exploring the jungle. Is what is there? I mean, no, it could be the lost city of Z. It could be a portal to, or the entrance point of a hollow earth. It could be that there's still an advanced civilization living buried in the jungle. They know that there are uncontacted tribes that want to remain uncontacted. And in fact, once their adventure started, for most of the time they were shadowed by
tribes?
by tribes that, like, in the night would shoot arrows at their dogs and stuff, but never revealed themselves. And so there was this palpable menace the entire time that they were being surveilled, and never, not attacked, but not left alone either.
The Brazil Witch Project, basically.
Yeah, that's right. The Brazil Witch Project. So they mount what is going to be a sizable and considerably dangerous expedition that's going to require months just to arrive at the headwaters.
Right.
At which point, Roosevelt's wife, very concerned that her middle-aged husband is embarking on
Getting in over his head.
really like this crazy expedition. And Roosevelt's full of bull and bluster.
It's going to be Bully. Edith Bully.
And
I don't know his wife's name. He had two.
When people suggest that this is above his pay grade, he makes several comments to the effect that if his bones are left to rot in the Amazon, then that's how he wants to go. He'd rather go that way than die sitting up in a chair. No, he's in his mid-50s. Like, he's not on his deathbed, but
That's probably, he probably has the fitness and the life expectancy of a 60-year-old, 60-something today. So,
yeah, although who knows? I mean, Roosevelt does end up having a shortened life, but it's not, and this perhaps played a role.
oh, is that right? Does this take a toll on him?
Yeah, but so Edith, his wife, and Kermit's mom, suggests that Kermit go with his father, largely to look after him.
Keep an eye on him. But what a terrible idea.
Right, put your son at risk as well.
Put both of them there. Like if something's, it's not like whatever the dangers of the headwaters of the Iparani River are. It's not like your kid at Harvard is going to be any better at it than your 50-year-old husband.
But it's perhaps testament to their confidence in Kermit that, he has an older brother, Teddy Roosevelt Sr., and Teddy Roosevelt Sr. isn't, although he is an explorer, and he and Kermit do go on expeditions later on in life.
Wait, they have a son? They have another Teddy Roosevelt son who's also an explorer? He doesn't get the nod, huh?
Didn't get the nod here, no.
Maybe he has a wife and kids. Is that the issue? Kermit's still in college and unattached? This entry in the omnibus is brought to you by Indeed. Now, not everybody listening here is looking to hire people. I understand that. But some of you probably, by the numbers, are.
We used to need assistance, but then your wife, Mindy, took over and she does the work of 10 normal people.
But if you don't have a superhuman 10-person assistant like Mindy, if you are looking to hire, you are wasting your time if you don't use Indeed.com. You will find quality candidates immediately with the Indeed Instant Match. So instead of spending your time doing that, you can actually meet and look to hire great people.
Unlike some hiring sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility, delivering a quality shortlist faster.
There's no long-term contracts. You can pause your account at any time. You only pay for what you need. And again, there is zero wait before you see a list of great candidates for whatever your job opening is.
Want your quality shortlist fast? You need Indeed. Right now, our listeners get a free $75 credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/omnibus.
There is no better offer available anywhere from Indeed. You can get a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/omnibus.
Indeed.com/omnibus. Offer valid through March 31st. Terms and conditions apply. So Teddy the younger, and he's actually Teddy Roosevelt III.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a Teddy Roosevelt. The Teddy Roosevelt Sr. is actually the older.
The president is Teddy Roosevelt Jr.
Yeah.
Huh.
He was by then, you're absolutely right, established in business and in banking, and was wasn't like going off on adventures with his dad as a kid in his 20s.
Yeah.
He goes on to be the governor of Puerto Rico and of the Philippines and assistant secretary of the Navy. So he was, that's why you can't tax the rich.
He was the political member of the family.
Of the family, right. But so they set off on this adventure. They have naturalists in their party, lots of porters and various other, I think they still did imagine that although this was going to be an adventure full of hardships and also real science, that they were going to be able to maintain a certain amount of civility in the other sense of the term.
We're not beasts.
Right.
I'm sure they packed China service for 8.
They may have, but they failed to pack adequate food and medicine.
Oh.
So even by the time they arrived at the headwaters of the River of Doubt,
the starting point,
it was already clear that they did not have enough gear.
Had maybe Rondon had not run anything at this scale before?
No, it was that Rondon, I think, was more rough and tumble. I mean, he was hardy and someone who had not just recently been president of the United States.
He needs 3 grams of goat jerky a day and a mouthful of dirty water, and he's good.
Yeah, and this party was, I don't think that they were dilettantes, but they were not prepared for the scale of hardship they were about to face. And so even before they started down the river, a large portion of the party kind of broke off and said, we're not going to be able to follow all the way. If we all go down the river, it's going to be a massive disaster. So a much smaller party of around 20 people set off. Roosevelt, Kermit, Rondon, and assorted porters, and they're immediately sort of beset by hardship. They're traveling in dugout canoes, which are heavy and ungainly and
hard to portage if you have to, right?
Extremely hard to portage. And almost immediately they realize that this river is full of waterfalls and impassable rapids.
Oh, so there is lots of...
And they're pulling those canoes out and carrying them around waterfalls multiple times a day. So they're making very little progress. At one point, something like they're reduced to traveling 7 miles a day. When on a going downstream on a river, you should be covering a lot more territory.
And I'm sure the stores were the food stores had the river speed in mind.
Yeah, exactly right. And then they are besieged by gnats and mosquitoes. Every time they stop moving, even for a second, they're covered with bugs. They get malaria. Roosevelt gets malaria so badly that he ends up kind of at death's door, and then he gets a bad cut and infection on his leg and descends into a kind of delirious sickness where everyone assumes that he could die at any moment. And, you hear that a lot when you talk about people on great adventures, that like he was near death and then recovered and triumphantly, marched down the Avenue of Heroes. But in fact, for a lot of the adventure, he was being carried on a litter. He was
he did not bounce back.
He was insensible. It was assumed every night he wouldn't live through the night. And at one point he said to Kermit, leave me behind. I'm holding back the adventure and, let me die. And Kermit said, I'm going to carry your body out either way.
Yeah.
And so if you're dead, it's worse because it will just make it so much harder. So please continue to take your iodine and live.
Quinine, probably.
Or quinine. Sorry, that's what I meant. Continue to take your quinine and live, because you're easier to move if you can, at least lift your arms. And Roosevelt did, I guess that rallied his spirits. Kermit also suffering from malaria.
But we could have very easily had a U.S. president. No U.S. president has ever died overseas, I'm pretty sure. But we almost left one in the middle of nowhere, Mato Grosso, Brazil.
They did. It was a successful. They did gather a lot of specimens, and they did chart the river. Of everyone in the party, only Rondon did not get sick, and somehow he had just a sort of natural immunity to the bugs.
Probably years of those bugs.
Yeah, years in the bush. There was even at one point Kermit's dugout canoe got caught in a whirlpool and went over a rapid, and Kermit swam to safety, but one of the porters went over the waterfall and died.
Oh, there were actual deaths.
Multiple
not
deaths.
Everybody made it back. Oh, wow.
In one case, one of the porters was caught by another one stealing food, and he, having been caught, shot shot his accuser and then ran off into the jungle.
Wow.
And the party tried to pursue him but couldn't find him, and so left him. So presumably he also perished, or maybe he's the father of a whole generation of mestizo children.
Yeah, he's still there, 160 years old, preserved by whatever weird Amazon mushrooms.
Yeah, preserved by mushrooms and amber.
Yeah.
Ambergris.
Probably not ambergris.
But they finally made it out. They did make it down river and were rescued at the sort of the confluence of the River of Doubt and the Aripuanã. And when Roosevelt then received medical treatment, by the time he arrived back in the United States, he was just able to walk down the gangplank of the ship, and
which I'm sure he was a relief, since they were probably photographers and press.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was one of those, I think, where they lifted him up and put the handrail under him, and he was able to walk down.
But he was not feeling so bully.
Not so bully. He was. There was considerable doubt that he had actually traveled as far as he had. Considerable doubt in the popular press. Again, accusations, like
the river slurs, of consumer doubt.
Yeah, slurs that he had it wasn't possible that he had actually charted 1,000 miles of uncharted river.
Uh-huh.
But he went on another speaking tour. He wrote a book and angrily defended his reputation, and I think convinced people that he had actually done what he'd done.
That does get the taste of his election loss out of his mouth. Now that he has a new battle to fight in this one,
that's right.
He knows he can win on the merits.
Rondon actually became a larger than life figure in Brazil. He was one of the first people to advocate strongly for the creation of parks and reserves that would be off limits to people in order to maintain uncontacted tribes.
He's the Teddy Roosevelt of Brazil?
In a way, he is. In fact, that whole territory that they were transiting is actually now the state of Rondônia.
Wow.
Within Brazil.
I guess in America, we'll name states after anybody. There's 2 states named for some King Charles that nobody cares about.
Although, yeah, in this case, it was...
That's probably not true, actually.
It could have been the state of Thickbush, but became the state of Rondônia instead. He was a... this was an era, and I think it's kind of maybe true now, where the philosophy of positivism was still sort of ascendant in the world of educated statesmen.
How do you mean?
Positivism was the philosophy of science that we could only know what we could see and measure, and metaphysics, and that civilization happened in 3 stages, and the first stage was religion, that you attribute everything that happens in the natural world to God, and then the intermediate stage was a kind of post-Enlightenment metaphysical world where you're curious about the world of poetry and feelings and humanism,
right?
And then positivism was supposed to be the third world, or the final evolution, where all of that loosey-goosey poetry stuff is recognized as unquantifiable, and a world that is quantifiable and deducible and reducible becomes kind of the guiding. That's the final evolution, where we base our knowledge on what we can know. And it's an era of individualism. The presumption is that government is necessary to rule over people who are living in a world where they believe in the supernatural, and a world where they believe in the poetical. But once you arrive at positivism, then each person can self-govern, because there's
based on the evidence of their own senses.
That's right. There's no superstition and whatnot. And so Rondon, his desire to create these preserves where the indigenous people can live uncontacted was an expression of his belief that those tribes were not inferiors, but were simply living in the first of 3 stages, and in order to get them to the metaphysical stage and to then the positivist phase, it had to be a process of attraction rather than promotion. And his motto, as I foreshadowed, his motto was, in exploring the interior of Brazil, was "Die if need be, but never kill." And in all of his work in contacting and working with, and for lack of a better term, I think he would have said domesticating, making diplomatic,
civilizing,
making diplomatic inroads with the tribes. They apparently never killed.
No violence.
Yeah, it was.
That's what passes for enlightened in 1913. I didn't kill a single Indian, and I coulda. It
was the technique they used was described as flirting. And we talked about it in some of our where you go and you leave a little pile of coconuts and then get out, and then peer at them through binoculars.
It's like passing a note.
Yeah.
Do you like coconut?
you
Check
like
one.
these?
Yes, no.
We can give you more coconuts. So he, Rondon, and I think of course all of that methodology and that way of thinking has been discredited. And I don't think anybody really believes in positivism anymore. It's, because it's so insufficient to describe. If you take all of the humanism out of arts and letters, I mean, basically you would be taking arts and letters out of your consideration. And
you might need some of those letters later.
You're going to need them later. You're going to need to rip that letter off your letter sweater and turn bark into fork. Unfortunately, the sickness and injury that Teddy experienced in exploring the River of Doubt, which even during the expedition was renamed Rio Roosevelt.
Oh, that's nice.
Although
Rondon knows which side his tortilla is buttered on.
And Roosevelt is apparently a difficult name to pronounce in Portuguese. And so
it's not super easy in English either. We're not crazy about our
Roosevelt
weird Dutch vowels.
But so it's colloquially known as Rio Teddy.
Oh, that's funny.
And there's actually a tributary that's also named Rio Kermit on just because, sure, why not?
Always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
You never know whether Kermit's going to end up being president. But Teddy carries his Brazilian injuries with him and dies a few short years later at the age of 60.
Is it like a complication? What's the cause of death?
He was so weakened by the malaria and the infections that he never fully recovered. And I think dying at age 60 is premature for a man as hale and hearty as Roosevelt.
It's a real life lesson about how to manage a midlife crisis. Keep the downsides in mind when you say, I need a fresh start. Which way to the Mato Grosso?
When you get to the headwaters and you realize that your white linen suit isn't going to cut it, you have a choice, like go back to the hotel.
It's not a phase of your life for reinvention. And that's the tragedy of midlife crises, is people thinking, this is my time for reinvention. No, sir. You're in your 50s. You are now you. You have missed that.
You are you. Right. And I think Roosevelt probably saw his presidencies as times when he was off the market. He should have been out shooting elephants during that whole period.
That's true.
And he still feels young and hearty and but he didn't. I mean, he survived it, but didn't survive it. Never lived it down.
So maybe Rondon did actually kill one person. He assassinated a U.S. president.
I think that Rondon got away with the crime,
despite his motto. And that concludes The River of Doubt. Entry 1076.PS7208. Certificate number 27531. In the omnibus. Now, just for your reference in the future, if there's any cultural memory of social media, obviously positivism can no longer prove the existence of any particular social media platform or other to you.
True. As far as we know.
So you're going to have to rely on our word for it that we were at Omnibus Project and at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick on Twitter and etc. Facebook, Instagram. John had an OnlyFans, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You could email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. Send us your Portuguese pronunciation corrections. We are eager to hear them.
Yes.
I just implied that they eat tortillas there. You're not going to let that stand, are you?
Oh, but you're talking about egg-based tortillas.
I don't even know if they have those in Brazil. Please correct me on which flatbreads or starches are most appropriate to Brazilian cuisine. And I couldn't think of which King Charles, North Carolina was named for. You could tell me that. You could tell me all kinds of things. I won't read it, but why not?
Sure, you will.
You'll
I know
feel
you
better.
do.
You can send us physical items. I don't know what that would be, but if you have something you need us to see.
Coconuts. So flirt with us. See if through coconuts you can bring us out of our respective jungles.
I have here something that... JJ Verbino sent us. I'm revealing his name because he goes by Verbs. I don't know if that's his DJ name. But
his DJ name is Cut Creator.
But he sent us a couple copies of his split EP. He doesn't want to call it an EP since there's only 3 songs.
Oh, who did he split it with?
I don't know why it's split. Maybe he means like it's a partial EP.
But I mean, I think a split EP is where 2 bands contribute songs to either side of an EP. Is he coining a new use of it, which is just that it's 3 songs?
Oh, no, it appears there is another name on the back.
Right. Split EP.
Front Porch Revival.
Okay.
Why are you so interested in the non-Verbs band,
Well,
John?
I'm not. It's just, a split EP. I have a split 7-inch with Spiral Stairs.
He says he, is not able to support our Patreon right now, but he enjoys the show and would like us to listen to his music in exchange.
Thanks very much.
I think that's the same. I wouldn't, I like cash, but I also like when people give me a mixtape.
Sure, free music.
those are the same to me. Thank you, JJ. And what else do we do besides
What else?
that?
Did anybody send us their granddad's clothes?
Sadly, no. Maybe next time. Oh, since I mentioned the Patreon, if you are unable to send us a split EP, I'm sorry, you are required then to become a supporter of the show.
Or make a split EP ASAP.
At patreon.com/omnibusproject. You will receive benefits like actually bonus episodes if like 2 to 3 hours a week of Omnibus is not enough.
Mm-hmm. And once you hear one of the bonus episodes, you'll realize it's what you were missing.
It is. If you don't think there's just enough of us dinking around in a regular show, because we keep having to get back to Brazilian geography. Imagine a version of the Omnibus that has no Brazilian geography to return to.
When I was preparing that episode and I realized that region of Brazil was called Thick Bush, I tried to anticipate what you would do with that. What corny joke you would make.
It's just one of these 80s topics we're always accused of doing.
But then
Thick Bush.
Then you leaned into it and I think really pulled it off. And that's the
high praise.
That's the reason this show is so, I think, creatively successful.
Coming from you, someone who has never liked a single thing I've said on this show, that actually means a lot.
I liked it. It wasn't a pun. It was, you had puns around it, but it was...
It's pun adjacent.
Pun adjacent.
There are, another more elite benefit from supporting the Omnibus is actually getting to suggest a topic of a show. And in this case, we have told the story of Kermit Roosevelt so that in the near future, we can tell you the story of a different Kermit Roosevelt, a story suggested by a listener named Ron. So that will be coming up soon. More Kermit content to come.
More Kermit content to come.
Why are there so many songs about podcasts about Kermits? You can find fellow like-minded Omnibus listeners at the Futurelings on Reddit or Discord or more especially Facebook. And boy, that's it, right?
I feel like it is.
I did it.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, up the Amazon of history.
Up the Amazon of your own... What?
Up the Amazon of...
Up your own Amazon?
Up your Amazon. Up the Amazon of a time when puns were still legal.
Not punishable by death.
We have no idea how long our civilization survived, or if you could even call it that. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.